Thank you so much for tuning in. We are doing kind of a like off the cuff sort of podcast video episode because we wanted to be helpful for people who might find themselves suddenly working from home because of COVID-19 and also stuck at home with kids, trying to get work done, trying to stay productive, trying to manage all of that stuff. So we don't have all the answers, but we do have some experience with that. And so we thought we'll just hop on here and share some of the things that we do, answer some of the questions that we've gotten. And so that's what we're going to do as you're watching. Hey, Alana.
Hey, Alana.
How's it going? Thank you for tuning in.
2 blocks over.
I know, but stay there. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, can I just say it's, I feel like since everything really started like, going off the rails, like I've just been in kind of like problem solving mode, which is, it's something that I kind of do. Like I will, like if an emergency comes up in the house or like something major is going on, I have this kind of mental zone that I get into where I'm like, okay, let's look at everything and solve the problems and fix this and get back to, you know, something where we can finally step back and assess things. And
yeah, one of our kids, what was it? He calls it crisis mode. He was like, I think we're in crisis mode now, aren't we? And we were like, well, kind of. Crisis mode is what happens when your kid comes home with lice or
right. So
somebody has strep throat that they keep passing around to all 6 kids for 6 weeks. So
to be honest, I don't feel like I've really taken a breath. We did have kind of a movie night last night. The boys watched a movie and
that's a typical Friday night then.
Yeah. And we like made ourselves some delicious food to eat at home. And so the boys in another room, they watch a movie, and then like Rachel and I sit on the couch with TV trays and set up the iPad and we watch like our Netflix shows that we're trying to catch up on.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. It was nice to...
It was a break.
And this morning we got out and we went for a run in the neighborhood, like really early while everybody was still asleep. And it was just so quiet and calm. There were maybe, I saw like 5 or 6 cars total in the time that we were out there. Yeah, a lot of
people out.
And it was
I saw a few walkers, but yeah.
It was just really nice to be in our normal routine. But you know, in some ways it's easier for us to do that because we, most of the time, so like when the kids are in school, we've got a really similar schedule to what we do when the kids are home from school. But like during summer break, the kids are home from school and we're still working. During spring break or during a winter break, the kids are home from school and we're still working. So we've kind of gotten used to help, like doing things to make sure that we maintain our habits and routines when they're disrupted because we've just gotten used to that. So anyways, I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but I want to go ahead and get into this because I don't want to take up too much of your time and I want to be helpful. But as you're watching this, even if you're watching this later, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to comment. Again, we don't have it all figured out, but we could at least share ideas and help one another. If you have ideas, seriously, like if you're like, wow, Ben and Rachel, you do it that way, maybe you should do this instead. We're totally open to that as well. So, but we posted about this earlier and we got quite a few questions. And so we're going to kind of work through those. And then as we do that, we'll mix in like some of the stuff that we do for our normal routine and what our schedule kind of looks like. Does that work for you? Okay, yeah. Cool. Okay. So, we got a question that was about independent play and screen dependence. So I feel like this is one of those things that Rachel's much better about than I am when it comes to screen dependence. And this is also a pretty personal thing depending on how you operate your family and stuff. Some people have really strong feelings about what you should or shouldn't do with screen time. And some people feel really, or don't have strong feelings about it. And they're like, it's whatever. So we happen to operate our home where we are pretty restrictive with screen time. And that's kind of for a couple of reasons. One of the major reasons is just some of the research we've done about like cognitive development and stuff like that. And really, so it depends on like, how much stock you put in that. And
it depends on age too.
Yeah.
So like the younger children, of course, have higher restrictions than the older ones do. So yeah, but we are restrictive too, because like we, especially me, I focus a lot on reading, and I want our sons to love reading. And so they, if they come to us and they're like, I'm bored, I'm like, we have a whole house full of books. And they have books from the library. They have audiobooks they can listen to. And then there are creative things that the kids can do too. And we encourage creativity, even though it makes a mess, like big messes a lot of the time.
So, yeah. So in terms of it being something useful, working from home. So I'm definitely probably more likely than Rachel to, if I really need to focus on something and it's quote unquote my shift, which we'll get into like how we trade off our schedules, but if it's my shift with the kids, but there's something that I really need to focus and finish up. I'm more likely than Rachel to put on a movie for them or something like that. And one of the things that, I don't know that like we purposefully set it up this way, but it's very difficult for our kids to have significant screen time that's portable, that they can just take anywhere in the house. There are a few pretty like set places for them to have some screen time. And so,
well, and we did that intentionally so that we can monitor what they're doing. Like they're not allowed to have their phones or whatever in their rooms when there's unmonitored access to, the internet and things like that. So, and we're still learning all of that too. Like this is our generation is the first generation of parents who has to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't know where to look. Like, I feel like I'm not looking at the right.
It's okay. I'm going to point. It's right in the center of that.
Okay,
Can you see it now? Okay.
I feel like I'm like looking all over. I'm looking over people's heads.
Sorry. Didn't mean to poke you in the eye there. No, I've got this teleprompter thing. And so like you can't even see where the lens is. I know where it is because I use it all the time. Yeah. So, and this is kind of my theory, but it seems to work out with our kids is, in the past when we've had fewer restrictions on screen time and we've let them use as much as they want, over time that becomes less effective at distracting them, and keeping them from coming to us constantly being like, what do we do?
So it's like a strategic limitation.
So it's kind of like if we limit it, then when we actually do use it, it's super effective. Like even to the tune of 1 hour a day, they'll sit down and
they don't move.
I won't hear a word.
Yeah.
And I just know from our past experience that when we've let them have more screen time, they just tend to get bored with it faster, and it ends up, it's like they're overstimulated and they're bored, which is a terrible combination. So that's kind of what's difficult in the beginning. And this is kind of what we had to cultivate over the years. What's difficult in the beginning is helping them, especially if they're used to having a lot of screen time. And again, if that works for you and that's something that allows you to get the work done that you need to without being super stressed out, there are trade-offs, and that's the whole thing about parenting. Like, you're constantly choosing, okay, what's going to be the best thing here that's actually going to work. And that's not always like the thing that you would do ideally, but you got to do what works. But if you can help them to find the same kind of that same level of distraction in things like books, playing board games, playing outside, playing with toys, maybe working on creative projects. These are all things that we've kind of built some of our lifestyle around, that the boys can go to when they're not having screen time. And so the variety of all of those things, I think for us, has helped them not to get as bored with any one of those things, so that we're dealing less with like the constant, hey, what do I do now? I'm bored. And it's more like, okay, we have this rhythm now that we can say, okay, once you're done doing that, if I need to, I'll help you transition from one thing to the next thing. But then I know I've got another good like hour to hour and a half of focused work time that I can have while you're doing that.
Well, and I don't think we did this summer, but we sometimes have like stations for them where we have like, okay, now it's the arts and crafts station, and we have a bunch of like, for some reason they love thread, and they'll like braid little bracelets, and it's super annoying because it gets super messy, but it's also something that keeps them entertained. I also usually have like a blackout poetry. We have a lot of old books that we don't need anymore, and they just tear out pages and do blackout poetry from that. And all of that is like, it's really creative for them, and it's cultivating their creativity, but it's also giving them something to do where they're not constantly like, Mama, I'm so bored, can I watch something? Or some of those, I don't know, the questions, or they're constantly eating. So
yeah, food's a little bit of a problem we're still trying to figure out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next one. Dealing with conflict.
Wait. I wanted to say one thing about the independent play too. I think we're also fortunate in that we have so many that they kind of keep each other distracted. Yeah. And while that also increases the amount of fighting that happens, they also they have their own little, it's like a daycare that they just play together, like Legos, all kinds of stuff. We have a separate place for all of the Legos. So like, if they're out, it's in our garage, and we call it the playroom. And if they're out in the playroom, like, they'll play with Legos for hours when we can get work done. So having a space like that is really, really nice too.
Yeah. And that's an important thing that you brought up though. Like, the fewer that you have around the same age that share interests, the more difficult it is, I think, in some cases, for them to continue, like have longer stretches of being preoccupied with something, because there's only, especially if you've got a single, there's only so much you can do on your own without feeling like, I want to share this with somebody, So, it's tough. But when you don't have, this is a good segue, when you don't have as many kids, you might have fewer conflicts. Yeah. So how do you deal with conflicts? There was actually another question that was similar. If fighting is an issue between siblings, which I don't know that I've met anybody with kids who doesn't deal with some form of
I think research shows that kids fight like every 3.5 minutes or something, and I feel like ours are overachievers. Like, it's more than that.
Yeah. They're definitely overachievers. If fighting is an issue between siblings, how do you separate them? I try to empower my kids to realize that alone time is good. We all need our own space sometimes. It's better than saying mean things to someone. So my question is, how do you unite and conquer? I like that question. And then some of the statements you made in there are great. It's really great for kids to have alone time and to have their own spaces. And that's one of the things we've talked about a lot, but I don't think we've done a great job of implementing. And it's tough. We've got a big house, but it's not necessarily a big enough house to provide a place for like 8 people to have their own space that they can go to and just be by themselves. Jaden has his own room. So that's a conversation we keep coming back to and keep meaning to, like, hey, we need to make sure that everybody like identifies and has a place where they can go. So I think they've kind of, some of them have carved that out for themselves in some ways, but
well, and our twins share a room, and then there's another room that's like, it doesn't even have a door. It's just like this. It was a game room. It was built as a game room in our house, and 3 of our boys share that one. And so it's like, they don't necessarily have their own private spaces, but within those spaces, they kind of have, like, Asa has his bed. Asher has his little bed on the floor, and so they can sort of have their own alone places. And we've kind of talked about the vocabulary around, hey, I need to be alone now. And I think the ones who are more introverted take advantage of that more. So for sure, like, I will go in my room and close the door, because there comes a point for me where I'm like, I can't take another word. Like, I feel like my head is going to explode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's definitely something, just trying to help them identify and find their own places where they can have alone time, where they can go and just cool off if they need to. And Jaden does that all the time. And he's pretty good about that, even though sometimes, like, he'll go off on a huff and like slam his door and stuff. But we know,
good cool down.
Yeah, we know that when he goes in his room, he is probably, like 10 to 15 minutes away from letting that emotion wash through. Which is this. So this is, I feel like this could be a whole episode itself, where we talk about like the language around conflict and stuff like that. It's important. And we've really tried to facilitate good conflict, not avoid it, but facilitate good conflict. And so when we talk about the things that cause conflict, I want to talk about the emotion stuff first, because I think this is important. Like, people feel angry and they get frustrated. They misunderstand things, and it makes them feel like they're being personally attacked or whatever. And from those feelings come different actions. And with kids, sometimes it's yelling, and that escalates. Sometimes it's hitting one another. Sometimes it's, just leaving. But whatever it is, we always try to help our boys understand that there's nothing wrong with being angry. There's nothing wrong with feeling frustrated. It's okay to feel angry. And if they've done something in their anger that they're not supposed to do, we try to separate those two. So we say the anger is good. It's good for you to have your feelings and to know where those feelings came from. What you chose to do with it, that's where we need to change things and fix things. And so, like, that's kind of the way that we talk about it. And I'm hoping that over time, that's helping them understand and be more accepting of their own emotions, while at the same time, being able to work on the way they express their emotions, and not, if they make a mistake, not connecting that mistake to the emotion itself, but to the action that was taken.
Well, and we've also created what do you call it? Just a vocabulary around conflict where we're really, really working hard to get them to solve the conflicts on their own first. So the question about like when you have your kids home and you're trying to work from home and they're fighting every 3.5 minutes and coming to you constantly like tattling or whatever, we've worked really hard, and we actually have a mantra in our house where we say use your words, and if your words don't work, ask for help. So what our boys know about that is if they use their words and those words are not effective. So say, for instance, somebody takes a pencil that someone else was using, and we'll just call them Boaz and Zadok. How about that? So Zadok takes Boaz's pencil, and Boaz wants that back because he's about to draw something that he thinks is really important. So he asks Zadok for the pencil back. He says, Zadok, may I please have that pencil back? And Zadok says no. So then Boaz has used his words. His words didn't work. So he can come to one of us and say, Zadok took my pencil and he's not giving it back. So in that case, the person who gets in trouble is Zadok, because when a brother uses his words to ask for something back, the brother who has taken something knows that he should give it back, especially if it belongs to the other person. So we've worked really hard to try to have this conflict resolution where they're being communicative, and the person who's in the wrong is actually responding in the correct way. Not that happens every time. They still come in and talk to us.
Yeah.
But it's worked a lot more. Like, it's cut down on the percentage of times they come to us.
Yeah. And I feel like that's where we should have started. Is it's important for them to have the tools and the understanding of, their emotions and their actions and all of that. But I love this idea that, like, we are not the first line of defense for solving your conflict.
Right. You
are. You actually have the power in your words to change things. And, when kids are young, the fastest way to the result that they want is often physical. And that's just part of development. Especially because, for the first 4 years of their life, they don't have the mastery of language to even be able to resolve conflict. And so it's like, if somebody took something from me and I want it back, it's really inefficient for me to like try. I've as a 3-year-old, the easiest way for me to fix that situation is to just take it back. So they just carry that with them into adolescence. And so we're just trying to train them a better way that doesn't end up in physical altercation and stuff. And, in the example that you gave, if I can't remember who did the taking, but
Zadok took from Boaz.
But if the one who the pencil was taken from comes to us immediately without saying anything, we call that tattling. And we've got a pretty strict, like, no tattling rule in our family. I like the idea of brothers looking out for one another in the sense that, like, if one sees somebody else doing something wrong, as long as it's not putting them in immediate danger or harming someone, they get to be a good brother and say, hey, you shouldn't do that. Mama and Daddy told us not to, and I don't want you to get in trouble. And we try to create that kind of sense of camaraderie among them. But then also, like, when one of them wrongs the other, they are, like I said, the first line of defense for fixing that. And so if they come to us without having made any attempt whatsoever to solve the conflict, then it puts us in a position to have to do that work for them.
Well, and it not only creates more work for us, but it also eliminates their sense of agency. So they don't feel like they have any agency in solving a conflict if all they ever do is come to us and we're the ones who solve it for them. So it's kind of a twofold thing for us. I mean, it started out as like, stop coming to us. and tattling.
Right. It's like,
So,
please.
yeah.
All right. You want to move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. So the next one is about setting and keeping boundaries for space usage in the house while working. So do you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, I still feel like we struggle a little bit with this. So,
Our house does not have a room specifically that is like an office. What we're standing in right now is an offshoot of our master bedroom that has
and it all belongs to Ben.
Well, no. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get to work in
It
this
has
little
a
space.
curtain that goes across. I have to do a lot of video production work. So, I mean.
So I get to write out in the open in our bedroom in a little wing chair that's like maybe it's not even 10% of our bedroom. But anyway, all that aside.
We still have some working out to do on those issues.
So we work in our bedroom. I have a little, what is it called? An armoire where I can open it up and I have a computer. I stand at my desk and then at the end of the day I can close it. Or if I'm writing, I sit in a wing chair and have my journals open and stuff. And I think, for the most part, it's been pretty effective. Although I require like absolute silence whenever I'm writing, because any form of interruption can really like just jolt me out of flow and any kind of like creative energy that's happening. So when that's part of the problem that like we're still kind of working out is when one of our sons comes into the room, the door is open, I can see it. They don't come in quietly. They like
Yeah. If you've ever watched Seinfeld and you've seen the way Kramer comes into the room, that's kind of like what it's like.
Yeah. So they don't come in quietly, and it even though I wear headphones or I wear earbuds, but I don't want to like turn them up so loud that it hurts my ears. So that's still kind of an issue that we're working out. But for the most part, the boys know that our bedroom is kind of an off limits place because that's where Mama and Daddy are doing our work. And so they come in when it's tech time. We have a designated tech time in our house at 3:00. So I can always expect, I'm usually the one working in the afternoon, and I can always expect at 3:00, it's going to be like a revolving door as boy after boy comes in, getting the iPad and a phone and the Switch. And so
we've got some things to work out, and this is one of our broken systems. And we try to address broken systems every week during our family council meeting. Which is a weekly voluntary meeting.
Last week, I think we had one attendee.
Yeah. So really the key though, what has worked well for us and when it's working its best is when we're over communicating. And when we're extremely consistent. And I think one of the things, and this isn't like passing blame necessarily, but the school district, it seems like over the past couple of years has shifted to having more half days and more like either Mondays or Fridays where school is out. At least it seems that way to me. And so
yeah,
the boys have also been having more after school activities. And so I think like when those things started happening, kind of messed with our rhythm a little bit. But when you over communicate, sit everybody down, whoever you need to. So like I need to be in the conversation that Rachel has with the boys where she says, hey, from this time to this time, you've got to stay out of the room. You can't come in the room under any circumstance, because if you do, and this is the reality, like when you're working from home, it's not just the interruption, but it's the possibility of interruption that keeps you from really being able to get into that flow state with your work and really knock stuff out. So I need to be a part of that conversation where Rachel shares that with the boys. And then I know, okay, like part of my responsibility here is to remind the boys and keep them out of the room, and maybe be like the person who goes into the room to fetch things if they need. But, like there are some other things too. I just make sure that any of the stuff they might need is no longer in the space where Rachel needs to work, and vice versa. So, and just because you have that conversation one time.
Yeah. We've had it many times.
And this is true with, it's been such a personal, like an area of personal growth for me to kind of accept this idea that I need to hear things over and over and over and over again.
And I hate repeating myself, so that's a wonderful combination.
Yeah. And just when I think I finally grasped something, I still need to hear it over and over again. And it's the same thing with our kids. I mean, they need to be reminded often what the expectations are. And it feels sometimes like you're beating them over the head, but that's what it really takes if you want to communicate well with people, is you've got to be repetitive and make sure that you're making that message consistent. And then, you think about the things like where you work in the house, the times that you work on what days, and try to be as consistent as possible with those days and times and spaces, so that everybody else can develop habits around that consistency. It's really difficult to develop habits around inconsistent behavior. And so that's when the over communication becomes more necessary, because people really have to think, wait, is today the day that she was going to work in there at this time? And you don't want them to have to make those calculations. You want them to be able to lock in a habit around consistency. All right. So this next one is about planning times for work and family versus just taking what you get in the flow of the day. This is, I think Rachel's, to reframe the question, it's, do you have like a strict regimented schedule, or do you just go with the flow and kind of like take what you get throughout the day? And I definitely see the value in both. And Rachel's probably more likely to be the, regimented one. And I'm the one who's, like every 45 minutes I'm going downstairs and
the kids are like, Daddy,
grabbing some coffee and
Daddy, can you do this for me? Daddy, can you do this?
Yeah. And I get sucked into stuff.
I don't even go out of the room when it's my work shift, because I'm like, I know they'll bombard me with questions and
yeah. But one of the lovely things about working from home is not having to go a whole 7 or 8 hours of your day without seeing the people you love the most.
That's true. Yeah.
That's really a gift. And so, part of you may feel like, well, I don't want to take that for granted. They're only going to be young once. And one of the things that Rachel does that I really admire, and I'm not quite in a position to do this, but every 7th week, Rachel just takes the week off. And rather than doing her normal work schedule, she'll still hold herself up and read a little bit, but she'll also just take time to hang out with the boys and do stuff with them. And so I think you just have to kind of like strike the right balance. I feel like it is good to start from a regimented schedule. I feel like that's a great starting place, because then you have you build the structure, you establish the rules, and then you can like break them or bend them every once in a while.
I think some people have a harder time with regimented schedules too. Like I really do believe that, because my nature, I'm very much a creature of habit. Like I do the same things. I mean, if I had somebody like watching my life, like a predator or something, I would be so easy to like, I shouldn't say that on the internet. But like, you know, my evening routine and everything, like it's so predictable. 8:30 I start getting ready for bed and I do the same things every night.
So you're just going to tell them.
And that's kind of that's kind of my the way that I do my work schedule as well. It's like I have the same things that I do I mean, I vary a little bit from day to day, but most of the time it's like I have this 2-hour writing block for this particular story. I have another 2-hour writing block for this particular story. I have a 1-hour research block, and that's like all the time I get right now. But it's, I mean, it's just really easy for me to fall into a regimented schedule, which helps me like get a lot done in those 5 hours. Like I probably get quite a bit done in those 5 hours because I'm so like, I mean, I set timers. I'm very like consistent about that. But I think some people, their personalities just they don't mesh as well with regimentation, you know, like
Yeah.
I know that as soon as I sit down at 12:30 to do this 2-hour writing block, I know exactly what I'm doing and which story I'm working on and all of that. And so like everything has kind of been primed all day where it's like leading to that moment, you know? But I think some people are just like, sometimes I'm like, I wish I could be a little bit more like Ben, because whenever my schedule is interrupted, like I get really grumpy
Yeah.
about being interrupted. Or if there's like a plan that happens and I don't know about it and I already have my own plans, like,
So if that's you, then, you know, like I think the way that Rachel does it, where she is very regimented and then has this purposeful time set aside where she can just, you know, do whatever. I think that's a really great balance. But if that feels like a cage to you,
mm-hmm.
then you might like up the frequency of it. So maybe from day to day, like you do have blocks of time where you focus and do work. And then you have other times where you might still work,
Just
but
kind of up in the air.
but
like,
it's okay. Yeah, it's okay for it to be unstructured, and you might go downstairs and, you know, have a 10-minute conversation with your 5-year-old or whatever. So
yeah. Did you want to talk about the way that we structure our day too? To like,
yeah,
like that kind of goes along with.
yeah, definitely. So, in fact, the next question kind of asks about that. So,
Sample school.
before
schedule.
we get into that, I do want to address the question after that. Good tips to get a boy to wear clothes at home. I want to say for the grown-ups, for the adults, wearing workout clothes all day is
wonderful.
It's wonderful. I don't know if you have people in your life telling you, if you work from home, still get dressed up as if you're going to work. That is nonsense.
Nope.
That's nonsense. Be comfortable. Be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy it.
Some people may need the ritual of like dressing up in work clothes, but I'm not one of those. My kids only ever see me in workout clothes. I think one time when I was going to book club, I had like regular clothes on and they're like, oh, Mama, where are you going? Do you have a date with Daddy? No.
No. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Our kids like hardly ever see us in nice clothes. But yeah, no, you can't get boys to wear clothes while they're at home. It just.
Yeah. I mean, ours are, we don't mind them wearing pajamas. Like if they want to stay in pajamas all day. And most of them, like they have their own personalities about things. So we have a few of them who actually, the majority of them just get dressed themselves. But in the summertime, I was actually going to say this because I saw this question, and in the summertime, like they'll spend every single day in their swim trunks. Like I have a hard time getting them to put their swim trunks in the laundry so that I can wash them, because they're always like, we might go to the pool today, so we're going to be ready. and put on our swim trunks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's not so much like the kids not wearing clothes. It's more like, how many days do they spend in their clothes? Because we have several of them who are like taking their own showers now, but we don't monitor it as well as maybe we should, because like one is 13 and one is 10, and it's like eventually you want them to take showers on their own, but apparently that is not a priority. So we have shower days and they don't even, like, sometimes, yeah.
We'll have to get back to you on hygiene stuff.
Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, but as far as, like if you're going to be doing conference calls, videos, calls,
true.
stuff like that, I definitely recommend pointing the camera toward a part of the house where there's not as much danger of a half-dressed person, like running behind you. But I think especially during these times, you're going to find people a lot more understanding of like kid noise in the background. And I almost always, just as a matter of courtesy, even if I'm talking to a potential client that I might do some video work for, or if I'm talking to my boss and we're having a one-on-one meeting, if I'm talking to my podcast co-host that I meet with every other week, and we're talking about the topics or whatever, like I will start the call with a disclaimer that there might be some kid noise in the background. And I've not one time had someone be like, oh, well then call me back. Like nobody gives me a hard time about it. So I feel like it's just polite to mention that up front and be like, you may have seen the video of like the guy who's on national television news report, and his toddler comes like scooting in. So that's kind of the nightmare, right? But in reality, like it's kind of a fun interruption, and it makes people smile much more than it makes them mad. So schedule. So again, this is how we do things, and this is what has been working for us. So we have, for as long as we've had the boys, like we've had a nap time that goes from about 12:30 until 3:30. And that has been just like super consistent. And up until recently, when we changed that over from it being like a mandatory nap time for the younger ones, now it's from 12:30 to 3:30. Everybody has what's called quiet time. And quiet time is where we restrict certain activities, like playing outside or playing board games, stuff like that. And we say, okay, during quiet time, you can color in your coloring book, you can write in your journal, or you can read a book. And that's about it.
And when we say coloring book, it's not like they have these really intricate coloring books with gel pens that they will spend like hours. I feel like that was probably the best investment we made this Christmas was we got them like those adult coloring books, and they each have their own gel pen set, and they'll just sit for hours and color these pages, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Then they're not fighting over pens because they have their own.
And I don't know if it's just because we've been so consistent doing that, or if we're lucky and our children are freaks, but they really do, for the most part. Once we set them down with that, we don't have to really worry about them. Yeah. So I say that to kind of establish that becomes an anchor in our day. And for reasons of the way my schedule has been in the past, we still have kind of this standard schedule. We've been talking about changing things up. But the way it is right now is Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays Rachel is in charge of the boys in the morning and uh, up until 12:30, and that's the cutoff time, that 12:30. And then from 12:30 until dinner time, which for us is 5:30, I'm technically in charge of the boys. Now, the great thing is that during that buffer, that 12:30 to 3:30, like Rachel gets them set up, and then I pretty much don't have to worry about them. But that 3 hour stretch, though it is time I can get work done, it's harder for me to get like more focused work done where I'm not mindful of what's going on in the house. So I'll choose to do things during that time that are a little bit less, that require less focus, that I can still get done, but still like be available to the boys if I need to. And then on Wednesdays and Fridays, it's the other way around. I'm in charge of the boys in the morning up until 12:30, and then Rachel's in charge of the boys for the rest of the afternoon until dinner.
And we originally set that because it's really hard for one person to like get everybody ready for school 5 days a week. So it became something where, and at the same time, like one person to cook dinner every single weekday evening. So we kind of wanted to trade off a little bit to where like it wasn't just one person doing that all week. And it's kind of nice to like trade up the schedules because then I have the little buffer zone between on Wednesdays and Fridays. And for me, what that looks like is I don't get any writing done during that time, but I do some research stuff where I'm like reading a book or taking notes or something that can be easily interrupted and then get right back into whatever I need to do. So like it is possible with a creative career to actually like, you know, have those interruptions and get back into things. So
yeah, and so with our boys, when they're not in school, will usually sleep until like 7:30. And the great thing about that is we usually wake up between like 4:45 and 5:15.
Well, that's you.
That's me. Rachel wakes up earlier. But that gives us a little bit more than 2 hours in the morning before they're up and we need to like really get going with things. When school is in session, we've got to get them, you know, going a lot earlier and stuff. But, you know, obviously with them in school, it's easier in other ways. But with them at home, they'll sleep until 7:30.
Or if they don't sleep until 7:30, they know that like they stay in their beds. They don't like, usually one or both of us is out running until around 7 whenever they're out of school.
Yeah, so we can get our exercise done first thing. Sometimes like if I'm a little bit behind on some work, I'll get up first thing and, you know, just do some work then. And then, you know, like on days when Rachel's in charge of the boys in the morning, I might have breakfast with them and hang out for a little bit, make my coffee, and then come up and I just get to focus on working. And I know that she's got the boys taken care of. And so we're super fortunate to both be able to work from home, because of our ability to do that trade-off and just trust one another with the kids. And when we get to that 12:30 time, like I said, I'll usually shift gears from doing more focused work to doing stuff that I can still, you know, get stuff done and be productive, but also have an ear out for what the kids are doing. And then we've got this whole evening routine, like from dinner until probably 7:30 or 7:45 is just like dinner, after dinner chores, library time where we do some reading together, and we've got prayer request time, baths, getting everybody tucked in. We do all of that stuff. And then we've got a little bit of time in the evening, between an hour to an hour and a half, where the boys get to wind down, we get to wind down, and we go to bed pretty early. It's around 9:00, most nights. So that's basically our schedule. Anything like special in there that you think?
No, I don't think so. And I think this has been like, our oldest is 13, and we've had this schedule for 13 years, basically. So it's kind of one of those things, like, it feels normal to
Mm-hmm.
us. So some people who might not have even, they might not have a schedule at all. It'll feel a little bit harder to make those perimeters around work time and stuff like that. But for us, it kind of just feels natural because we've been doing it for so long and have kind of learned the best practices for accomplishing as much as we can in the amount of time that we have.
Yeah, and everybody's the thing that has worked for us, has been really trying to build backwards from, what do we want the first part of our day to look like? Okay, and then from there, how much sleep do we need to get? And if that's true, how early do we need to get to bed? And if we want to have time to wind down before that, when does that need to start? And if we want to start winding down by then, like, what things are we, what time do we need to start dinner so that all of the after dinner, so we just kind of build backwards, and then we build our work schedules around what's going to allow us to keep a steady rhythm with all of the, home responsibilities that you have. And so that's going to be different for everyone, but hopefully just from us sharing the ways that we've built those boundaries around our work time and the way that we've divided our schedule and responsibilities, that maybe gives you some ideas for how you could do that for yourself.
Well, and I'll say too that what you said earlier about over communication, I feel like it's really important when you have two parents who work from home, and especially during these times, if both parents are working from home and the kids are home, just having that open communication about what you need and what's not working, and just constantly revisiting that, because it's not a once done, always done thing. I mean, we've had countless conversations over the 13 years we've been doing this about like what's not working and what we need to shift to kind of make things a little better for whoever is trying to work. And we've set up some things, like I think this last week it was spring break for us, and you had like a video camera that you had in the little ones' rooms so that you could like keep an eye on them while you were working.
So I needed to. I wasn't.
Sorry, I couldn't.
I wasn't talking to you, Siri. I was in here. My computer is right next to me here, and I think I needed to get some writing done or I don't know what I was doing, but I needed to work at this computer. And so I had I've got a pretty big screen, like it's 27-inch, and I had a big window up for like the main thing that I was doing. And then I did a FaceTime call because I've got a Mac. I did a FaceTime call to a phone that I set up in the room. And I told the boys who were in the room were coloring, and then the older boys were downstairs, and they were like, doing quiet time stuff down there. And so I walked out and I said, okay, I have this camera set up. I'm going to set it to mute so that I can't hear you. If you need me for anything, just wave at the camera and I'll unmute it. And like, we can work stuff out. And I think maybe like within the first 5 minutes, they were messing with it and like talking to me because it was fun to be able to see me. And then they started like ignoring it. And I think maybe there was only one other time somebody needed something.
I thought it was pretty genius.
Well, so don't look for ways to be creative, like think outside the box. You might have what you need to be able to set something up like that, or there may be some other creative ways that you can make it work, but don't get trapped in like the conventional things when there might be some other possibilities out there.
You're pretty good about that, finding the possibilities.
Yeah. What is it? Necessity is the father of invention or something.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think unless you have anything else to add.
I don't think so. I was thinking about like things that kids could do in the meantime, like parents who aren't used to keeping their kids home. I think we threw out a couple of ideas, but one of the things that we cultivate in our house too is writing, and obviously that's important to me. So there was a summer where I did. I mean, it was several weeks of writing prompts. And I was actually thinking about that today, thinking about maybe finding a way to like put that somewhere on my website where parents, if they're like, I really need something for my kids to do, and they think that their kids might be interested in like writing prompts. I did a whole like summer of writing prompts for kids. So we might try to figure out a way to put that like on the website, to have, alternatives.
Yeah, if we do, I'll put it in the link in the comments so that you can get access to that. But yeah, like coming up with writing prompts, drawing prompts, anything creative.
You could probably use them as drawing prompts too.
The thing that, and here's the reality. We don't really know what the next several weeks or even several months are going to look like. We don't know exactly how long the schools might be closed. You might sometime in the future, when all of this blows over, find yourself in a situation where you are working remotely because your employer decided, hey, that was actually not so bad and maybe we can cut costs. Who knows? But I will say that it can take time and intentionality to build some of this when you're just not used to operating that way. But it's totally worth it. And I think even for somebody, even as things do get back to normal and people start going back to work, it's great for you to feel like your kids are equipped with a diverse set of tools to help keep them engaged and entertained, and all of the other stuff we touched on, resolving conflicts with one another without having to come to you all the time. That's a huge relief during the times when you are together as a family. So,
well, and one of the things that we try to teach our kids is independence. And so equipping them with some of these tools is really important for them to realize, hey, I can make my own world. I don't have to rely on, and that's a hard thing for parents because like I even feel it now. Our youngest is 5 and I'm like, man, they don't need me as much anymore. But at the same time, it's kind of nice. Like I can go out for a 2-hour run and they don't need me, and so just equipping them with the tools to entertain themselves and to resolve conflicts themselves. And even one thing we're working on now is like teaching them how to fix themselves breakfast, because the 13-year-old this morning came down at 10:30 and he's like, what's for breakfast? And we're like, well, we already had breakfast, so you can make your own.
Yeah. It's incredibly empowering for our kids to believe it's not that we don't want to do things for them as parents, although sometimes that's true. But for them to know that they're capable is huge. I think that goes to like this really deep sense of, a need to survive and be able to know what to do in a situation where you're the one who's responsible for taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. We kind of need to know that we've got the stuff that it takes to be able to do that. And so I feel like that's a huge gift that we give to our kids when we put them in a situation and help them develop those skills where they have to do stuff for themselves.
Also, like I would like to go on a date without having to pay a sitter.
Yeah, eventually. Mm-hmm. I wanted to say one more thing about the screen time stuff. We have recently, for the older boys, been more lenient with them about certain types of screen time. So there's screen time where like they're playing video games or watching something. And so in our house, we call that passive screen time, because even with playing video games, even though you're doing something,
You're just
it's
consuming.
still kind of a consuming, entertainment sort of activity. So we call that passive screen time. And then there's creative screen time, where they're actually using the tools on these devices like GarageBand to make songs, or the oldest two boys lately have been using voice memos to record podcasts. And that was a cool thing that they just kind of came up with on their own. They use an app to make stop motion movies. And so we want to try to give them as much freedom as we can to do those more creative things. Because that's kind of a different, at least I feel like that's a different part of the brain that they're engaging, and is also something that is really engrossing for them. I mean, they will work on a stop motion movie for like an hour and a half and not even take a break. Like it's really phenomenal. So that's also a possibility. And for us, really all it took was just introducing them to those tools and maybe showing them a little bit of how to use them. And then they just take off with it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this was helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and we're going to get through this. We will.
Yeah.
No,
just kidding.
So, all right. I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of your weekend. And who knows, maybe we'll do this again.
Maybe.
We'll see. All right. Take care.